There you go. Alright, welcome back to Dandadan, Anime Review, episode number 12. We're reviewing the 19th episode of the series. Excuse me. Which is called Feeling Kinda Gloomy. This adapts from the entirety of chapters 56, 57, 55, 56, and the first 13 pages of chapter 57. So kind of in a way with this episode, there are only 4.5 chapters left to go for this entire story arc. You're like, really? Only 4.5 chapters? Yeah, because the arc itself ends with chapter 62. That's why there's 4.5. Given the fact that it, in the case of what this episode adapted from the arc itself, it didn't exactly adapt the entire 57, all but last 6 pages, I think so. Yes, and plus this episode is return of a yokai who's not been seen since her debut story arc from the previous season of the show. So here's what happens. Okarun and Momo's friends are at the maid cafe with Momo, where she works as a maid. And they have a slight word change here because in the manga she says, "Welcome back, you piece of shit." Adults know what I'm talking about. In the anime he said, "Welcome back, you bastard." And it's slight word change, but still has the same effect. But my guess is they probably, Crunchyroll probably changed that because they probably did not want basically Momo to say the S word in this episode. That's my guess, but I don't think basically anybody who reads the manga from Dandadan and watches the anime, I don't think anybody will have an issue with that at all. And besides, what she said in the anime had the same effect, so no word change with that one. So after being there, and of course they poured the specialty, of course they have the girls just hung on a table, and of course Arun kind of is so embarrassed by this. And he and Momo are constantly blushing at each other because it is so obvious at this point in time that these two clearly have a thing for each other, but they're not acting on it just yet. Probably because also she's looking for his other ball. Yep, one of the golden balls. You know, the purpose of this arc. Because he has 2 balls. Of course, he had his whole thing taken away from him. And then one part was restored to him at the end of the first arc. And then eventually got one of the balls back. And then, throughout a lot of the saga, he's constantly looking for... He's not shown, but he is basically the desire to find the other ball so he could basically have his story be completed. Mostly, but there's no mention of that here per se. Yeah, it's so after the maid stuff, and then of course basically she has to have the 10 because she has a part-time job, and then finally by 10 basically she's ready to go home after constantly doing the same thing constantly for the next few hours. So Runkan, being a complete gentleman, offers to walk her home because it's cold, it may not be safe, but how nice of him to do that. And then of course they arrive at the Ayase house where it's still cold in the house. Seiko asks, "Momo, where you been?" "I got a part-time job." "Probably help fix the house." Yeah. And prior to their arrival, we have Gigi practicing sitting still and having Saiko's apprentice trying to push him over, but no luck. And then they have a test by using soy sauce. I have a bad experience with soy sauce. When I was in middle school, we had this mystery dinner where we were fed these liquids while being blindfolded, and I was fed soy sauce, a very small amount, basically a small spoonful, and that made me sick. After that, I never had soy sauce ever again. Because I did not want the same experience ever again. It's something that I know was not done on purpose. I'm not allergic to soy sauce. It's just because basically I got sick from the one time I had it. I prefer not to have it. So one drop is in GT's hand, and you see him trying to resist the transformation of Evil Eye. We see his arm bulging up, the earring popping, and everything is all normal. By the way, also, just by sheer coincidence, Ira is happily there drinking an iced coffee. It's like a fruit iced coffee. I've seen these things actually sold at, well, basically people drinking things from Starbucks. Well, my guess is that Japan must have their own version of Starbucks, so you drink it. And of course, then Momo and Arun can come home, and then of course she accidentally trips while standing next to Gigi, and then some of the coldness gets on Gigi. And then luckily before this, they were drinking hot water because they're cold. And everybody tries basically getting on. Of course, you have Seiko put in a talisman not working. And of course, you have Arunka transforming to Turbo Granny. Well, they use Turbo Granny powers. And of course, Evil Eye proceeds to rip her shirt open. Are you thinking that he's trying to rape her? No. He just doing because basically Evil Eye wants to strangle her. But I'm like, why in the world would he rip her shirt open for? Yeah, it makes no sense. Look at his power is pushed back. And just by sheer coincidence, she didn't swallow the hot water. Spits it right in Evil Eye's face. Tracks back normal. Gigi, of course, thinks that he did something wrong. Mom was like, "Oh, don't worry, you're fine. It's basically Evil Eye's fault." So then, of course, after this, basically, the apprentice, what is his name? Miko? Mondro. Yes. Yeah, basically Mondro, or basically things contact that band from the previous episode back. They don't. Well. Yeah, so. And then. Later that night, Iruka wants to get better by putting a good punch. And. Then, of course, basically. Here comes Turbo Granny. Where the heck. Oh, by the way, prior to this. Next day. Arunkan is looking for Mr. Ship Mantis. You're thinking, what? Yeah, this actually, believe it or not, the chapter that one of the chapters that was after for this episode is actually one of his 2 ever appearances in this entire arc. You're like, what? Because he was last seen at the end of the previous arc of the series, Cursed House. He was there for like the last 4 chapters, and then, and of course in the manga, he disappears for 5 straight chapters, comes back in 56, which is also the name of the child of the episode, and then we're not going to see him again until the final well, basically probably going to be episode 21 at this point, probably going to be just 2 episodes just after, because he comes back in episode well, probably 21-ish maybe. But in the manga comes back after 62. Or basically, Runka wants to learn some moves from him. He says no. He comes late. And then, of course, basically... Excuse me. Then he's practicing outside. Turbo Granny's there. Then Aria basically just and of course, he's in training. So they go straight to the high school. Aria follows him. And... Then, of course, she threatens Turbo Granny by using her Agabek Silky powers And you're like, what? Yeah, that's the thing about Akabak Silky. Like, she has these powers of this particular yokai. But yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, this is just a mention by her. Like, does Akabak Silky ever actually appear in the series after her debut arc? Not really, no. And then she's briefly using the powers. Aside from a flashback during the Damera arc, there's not much for her at all. I mean, and what does Arya do with her powers? Why, beat up by basically punch up a granny. And then they go to the music room where apparently, like, oh, there's rhythm of the piano for a while. And then, for some weird reason, the episode ends by having the historical composers, aka the musical portraits, coming to life. And the weird thing is, I only recognize one of these people, and that'd be freaking Beethoven. Yes, Beethoven. I know one is Beethoven. Or actually, there's a close-up of him. Okay, the other one's, they call him Grandma Bach. It's actually Sebastian Bach. So Verbon, I knew that was Beethoven. Grandma Bach is Johann Sebastian Bach. Telespar is Anton Dorbach. Ninth is Leonard Berson. Moza is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Yeah, he's a legendary composer. I've listened to a lot of music. His music is really good. On glasses, Fritz Schaubert. Yeah, along with Beethoven, he's probably one of the most recognizable composers in history of music. I learned about a lot about this guy in school. So yeah, we have debuted these new characters who are only in this arc because they appear very briefly and then were never seen again. Oh yeah, so that's pretty much a particular video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications. Next up, case closed. Get next video. Bye.